Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we're going to work on a Jig Master, but it's an odd one, and I thought I would bring that to you as well as a little history of Jig Masters, just because it is a popular reel, and some folks always ask me when did my Jig Master come along, and what's the date on it, and the like. So let's start with the first of the Jig Master series, if you will. It wasn't the Jig Master at all, it was the Penn Jigmaster. This one was introduced in the late 1940s and actually had a run through about 1975. It was almost identical. This one's been upgraded to the modern bars, and of course it's only a shell, but a lot of the parts for the Jigmaster 250 were interchangeable with the later edition of the Jigmaster 500. So the Jigmaster was the first one. It was an innovation in design in that it had the single take-apart screw, which we're all familiar with. In the 1958, Penn introduced the Jigmaster 500, and that was a high-speed version of the Jigmaster 250. The Jigmaster 250 was basically using the internal gearing from a Penn Long Beach series. So this stepped it up. It gave you a higher speed. And the original ones came with the plastic spools. The metal spools were optional. Later they moved over to aluminum spools after the chrome spool versions. Today you get an aluminum spool with those. Jigmaster is probably the only one from the late 50s that's still in production. So that's the 500. You also had a version of it, and this one's in pieces, but you had a version called the 501, and the 501 came out in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, and it had a short run. It's no longer in production, but a lot of people liked it for the shorter, narrower frame, gave you that high-speed, smaller, compact frame variety. Modern day Jigmasters are made in China. This is just an example of them. As I noted, there's an aluminum spool on this, and it's still in production today. But the one that we're going to work on is actually the Jigmaster 506. And I think a while ago we did the 505, which is the wide version of this. But this one came out in the 1985, and it had a short run. It had a run up to about 2000. So about 15 years it was on the market. It has ball bearing construction as opposed to the other construction. In this case, somebody put a leveraged handle on here, which probably came off the 4.0 Senator, an older 4.0 Senator. And this one belongs to Jeff. He's a member of a local saltwater fishing club. And Jeff asked me if I could tune this reel up. He said that he's having some trouble with the drags, and they seem to be skipping or not holding. I can notice it here. We're pretty much fully tightened down, but it's not grabbing as well as we might like. But other than that, the reel is in nice condition. And so we went ahead and we ordered the HT100 drag kit for this. We're going to replace the fabric washers and the metal washers all at the same time, given the age of this reel. And Jeff also sent along another high-speed handle that he would like me to change at that time. So let's get started. This one has the take-apart screw, single take-apart screw, just like the other Jigmasters that I was showing you. And simply turning it and pulling it around, and that will release this. So from a service standpoint, there's a bearing in the back here, so you want to just pull this off. There's a little bit of grease on here, which we can kind of get out. I'm assuming that grease is there for the click mechanism. The bearing we're going to use oil on, and I'm going to use Real X oil for the bearing. And I'll put a little bit of oil. There's some grease that remains on that click mechanism. I'll just oil that. To check the back of the spool just to make sure it's clean. There's a little bit of accumulated grease, so we'll just pull that off of that. And we'll just rewind the line and put that right back into the carrier here. So you'll notice a couple of things going on here as we've started to work. I have a latex glove on my hand to keep the greases and grime and such off my hand. We also have a parts tray in front of me here. It's the bottom of a milk jug, and I put all the small pieces and parts in that. And the rest of this is going to be kind of standard to a Jig Master. As I mentioned, it has a little bit of a change overall in the bearing structures, but for the most part it lines up pretty well. So if you're looking and you have a 500 Jig Master, you can follow along with this. It's going to be pretty much the same thing. We remove the handle screw, the handle. I'm going to remove the adjuster now, the star adjuster. And you want to do a couple of things. If you don't know the reel, you want to go out and get a schematic. This is a different schematic, but if you go to penparts.com or mysticparts.com, you will be able to get a schematic that shows you how this reel is set up. If you need any parts, you can order it off that schematic. And the other thing you want to do is take pictures along the way if you're not familiar. And of course, I'm doing that here with the video. If I get stuck along the way, I can certainly go back and reference where I took a piece off, or an orientation of a piece or a part, or so on. So I recommend that you take pictures, use your digital camera, use your cell phone, run a video, do whatever is most convenient for you. But at the end, you want to make sure that you can take those pictures so that if you get stuck, you can unstick yourself. Okay. So we've got the underlying piece, and you'll notice a lot of these are the same parts codes as the regular Jig Master. Makes sense. And we're just going to take these pieces and parts off here so that we can get to do a good cleaning on this reel and to replace those. So we've got some screws and some springs. And I like to put them into that parts tray because little parts tend to go missing. And if you can put them in a central place, you don't have to go looking for them when it's time to reinstall. And pull this off. Now the reel itself seems pretty clean. And I'm just going to clean up whatever's there, but there's not much there. Just some light grease in here. And there's a bearing on the back, so we're going to oil that bearing. I'm just going to let it sit in the side plate while we go on. So here's the main assembly then. It's a typical bridge, but just a little bit different in that the bridge points are a little bit further apart because of the bigger gear. So we'll go ahead and take this off. We're going to pull the gear sleeve off as well. This is a service, so you want to get underneath there and make sure there isn't any dried grease. That is held on by a pin, and you saw I used the small awl to pull that out. I'm going to leave that pin in there. I got lucky. Most of the time that just kind of comes out. So we're going to wipe that down. I feel a little tackiness on there. Just going to wipe it down, make sure it's nice and clean. If you had any questions, you could come back in with a penetrating oil and just put a little bit on there to help dissolve any gumminess if there was something like that there. Usually it's dirt and grime and grease, but occasionally you'll get something there, it's a little gummy. And then what we'll do is we'll take our Penn grease. It doesn't have to be Penn, but it should be real grease. This is Penn Precision Real Grease. And we're going to put a little bit of grease onto the bridge shaft here. Don't put too much on it. If it dries, it'll just clog it, but put enough on there that it makes a difference. Then we can just push that pin back in. Now that one was easy. It's not always going to be that easy for you. You may need to tap it in with a dead blow hammer or something, but overall that one was pretty easy. To set the dog spring, then we have the dog on the post here. Just grab the end of it and set it behind the arm here. Sometimes that pops off and then you don't have the dog, and then just make sure that it's working properly. Again, a drop of oil on that is certainly going to be fine. And then let's get under that drag stack here. So it's interesting here. Jeff was telling me that he's got slips. This has the HT100s in it, but they are worn. You can pretty much see that there's there's wear on the surface areas, and so that makes good sense just to go ahead and to clean and replace. Okay, and then there's a little bit of tarnish on the bottom here, so what we're going to do here is we're going to grab some steel wool. I'm going to come into the main gear and just clean that up. The drag power is all about the surface area and contact, so you really don't need or want dirt, grease, and grime. So that'll solve that for you if you keep it nice and clean. Okay, we're going to get the replacement package then. These came from mysticparts.com, which is a regional Penn Parts distributor. They own the website pennparts.com as well, but Mystic Parts has expanded. They have some aftermarket products now for Penn reels, so they wanted to broaden it beyond just the recognition of Penn. There's a hard washer that belongs on top. That's going to hold the dog in place. This little pin that I was talking about didn't get set all the way. You can feel it. It's pretty tight tolerance. And then we're going to just clean the bottom of the main gear. That's up next. Now, with the drag washers, the HD100s can use grease. So I'm going to use Cal's Universal Grease. I'm going to give it a good dose on both sides, just dipping it into the grease. Then I'm going to use my gloved hand as a tool. I'm going to wipe, rub it in, and then I'm going to take my paper towel and take the excess off of it. The whole idea behind the drag grease is to keep those washers flexible. These are new, so that we don't need to do anything about cleaning up the metals. We'll come back in again. We'll do the same thing a second time here with the middle one. Now, in the drag stack, you're going to find that you have two washers, two types of washers. You have a round washer and you have a keyed washer. So the first one in is the round washer. The middle one is always the keyed washer. You finish with the round washer again. So the second one up here, I'll go one more time with this. And go grab that. Make sure that gets rubbed in. And wipe the excess off again. And repeat. And then there should be one cap washer in here. There is. That came from that original stack. So that's your drag stack on the 506. And now we're ready to reinstall. So what we want to do, we've already done the greasing or the oiling of the bearing. We want to grab a little bit of the universal grease and put that around the eccentric. Next up then are the two springs which fit in the little hole. And we have our yoke. Again, you want to get the grease where that gear is going to be running. You're going to inspect the spool gear. Make sure all the teeth are okay. Put a little bit of grease onto the spool gear once that is. Now, if that needed cleaning, go ahead and grab a wire brush or a toothbrush or something similar to that and give it a good channel clean. So for example, we'll just use the main gear here, and that's what you would be doing. You'd be pulling that off and trying to make sure that all of the teeth were clear. And again, you look at all the teeth, you make sure that there's none that are dented, cracked, chipped, or otherwise look kind of out of the ordinary, because that will impact the performance of the reel. And then we're just going to put some grease onto that before we continue. Next up then, we're going to press down onto the yoke. I'm going to take the jack, slide it over the top of the eccentric. Oh, got it upside down. Slide it over the top of the eccentric, pull it in. And that's set up now for the install of the main bridge assembly there. So we've cleaned the bridge assembly, we've replaced the drag washers, we've cleared up the internals, making sure they're all nice and clean. We've re-lubed everything, including the spool gear. And notice on the spool gear, there's a valley in this one. It's kind of a U-shape. It's sort of hard to see this way, but it's a U-shape that always points out because there's a shoulder on the spool, and that shoulder rides inside the spool gear here, and that's what drives that. Okay, so the reassembly is easy enough then. We just take it, turn it around, and push it in, kind of holding everything together there. And then you will align with two studs. There's two plastic studs here that need to line up. There we go, and you'll feel them come on. There we go. So we're on now. And then what I like to do is pull the 4 screws out. I didn't explain this on the way out, so we'll explain it now. There's 2 different types of screws. There's a partially threaded screw and a fully threaded screw. The fully threaded screws go on the bottom. The partially threaded screws are set up that way because the springs that we put in there are going to ride there, and they don't want you to have that spring catch on the threads of the screw. All right, so now I install this, and I tighten these in a north, south, east, west pattern so that I keep equal tension onto the setup. And sometimes you'll find that the tolerances are tight. Right now we've probably got a little misalignment with the yoke, so I just use that pick that I used before to knock out the pin to center, and then you can get that one started as well. Once they're all started, then you can come back, and again in that X pattern or the northeast southwest pattern, you can tighten them all up so that you have equal tension on them. Alright, that should be the reel. Certainly working nice enough. Now the one piece that we weren't able to put any grease on while we were doing that is the back end of the jack here, which slides underneath the bridge assembly, so it's a good time to go ahead and do that. And just notice I have the string coming through the spool there. That needs to be pulled out before you can reassemble. I also notice that there's a little bit of grease in this channel. That's okay. If there's anything that happens with these reels, it's that channel tends to clog. All right, so we're going to grab the ferrule then, with the star adjuster. Now on the star adjuster, you're going to see, it's hard on this one, but you're going to see a readout here, a part number. That part number always goes down. There's a bright side and a semi-bright side. This side is rounded, the other side has got a flat finish to it. So make sure that the part number goes down. It's not going to make any difference in the operation. It makes a difference in the cosmetics of the reel. So just a quick word there. We're just trying to get this started there. So it's always that first line of threading. Always seems to be a little tough for some reason. And that's what's happening here. If you run into a problem, right now I'm spinning this, you could put this on the reel. That'll hold it. And then you can go ahead, you should be able to go ahead and tighten it. Well, it won't because there's no drag. Okay, use a Phillips head. Don't use a flat blade, bladed screwdriver, and just put pressure on the inside until you have enough clearance that you can put your handle over it, and then use the handle as a wrench to hold that as you go down and continue to tighten up on that adjuster. All right, there we go with that. Once that's on, we can tighten the screw down. And now we got a sweet running wheel there. Now Jeff did, as I mentioned, he did send me a new leverage handle, so let's have a look at that and see if we can install that while we're at it. Just going to go ahead and open up this package. Probably should have done that ahead of time, but that's what happens when you get busy in the shop. So I understand this one to be an aftermarket handle, and those of you that are looking for upgrades can find these. They're available on eBay and the like. Sometimes you can just buy the knob and put that on, or in some cases you need to buy the whole handle. In this case, Jeff liked the idea that this was a complete assembly. It's a ball bearing assembly on the handle knob, and he likes the throw of this from a leverage standpoint. You can see how far out that reaches. So that's really going to make this one turn. I'm going to go ahead and grab this. Now, if we didn't put the grease into that gear sleeve, you could put a drop of oil in there. And for further maintenance, yeah, you should, when you go to overhaul your reel, and these are easy because of that take-apart screw system, you should put a drop of oil in there. And just as Penn advises, they have oil on that handle screw there, and that's it. You should pull that out, or you can just simply push the little oil insert in. Okay, and then just lining that circle of the screw in with the little hold down screw. And if you don't align it properly, you're going to have trouble getting that screw in there. The idea on that hold down screw is to keep that handle screw from backing out and making your handle loose. Alright, so we're pretty much done with that. I did notice this is a little tight here, so we're just going to put a little bit of, there we go. Okay. Alrighty, so there you go. Now we've got a 506 Jig Master with a high leverage handle with new HT100 drags that is ready to go fishing. So Jeff, this one's coming back at you, and go enjoy that and go catch a lot of big fish with it. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this. If you did, please subscribe. That's what keeps my channel going. Please comment. I answer all questions and comments as part of the video package. And I'll answer your questions about other things as well. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.